It is often in the quietest moments, perhaps late at night when the notifications finally stop buzzing, that we realize how fast time is actually moving. It feels like the new year just started, yet here we are, already watching the days blur into weeks. We all have those moments where we look back and wonder where the time went. Maybe you are sitting there right now, feeling the weight of the past 12 months pressing down on your shoulders. You might be thinking about the relationships that faded, the projects that never launched, or simply that low-level hum of anxiety that seems to follow us around in the modern world. We carry so much invisible luggage. We replay old conversations in the shower. We cringe at mistakes we made 3 years ago. We worry about the future before it even arrives. It is exhausting, isn't it? But before we spiral down that rabbit hole, I want to share a thought from the great French writer Guy de Maupassant. He once wrote something that I think we all need to hear. Life is never as good or as bad as one thinks. Think about that for a second. Our minds are excellent storytellers, but they are terrible historians. We tend to edit our memories, highlighting the pain and zooming in on the failures. We convince ourselves that we are stuck, that the world is heavy, and that everyone else has it figured out. But the truth is, most of the chaos we feel is not out there in the world. It is right here, inside our own heads. We are the directors of our own misery. I want to tell you a story about this. It is an old parable about a wealthy merchant who lived a long time ago. This man had everything that we are told we should want. He had money, status, and influence. But despite all of that, he was deeply unhappy. He spent his days frowning, constantly stressed about his business. One day, feeling completely burnt out, he climbed a mountain to visit a wise monk. The monk looked at the exhausted merchant and asked him, "Why are you so heavy-hearted?" The merchant sighed and said, "I am constantly worried. I worry that my shipments will not arrive. I worry that the market prices will crash. I worry that my competitors will destroy me. Even when things are going well, I cannot relax because I am waiting for the other shoe to drop." The monk nodded slowly. He did not offer a motivational speech. Instead, he led the merchant to a quiet clearing and asked him to build a fire. The merchant gathered wood and lit the flame. As the fire began to crackle and pop, the monk pointed to it and asked, "Look at that fire. It is producing heat and light. But tell me, do you see the smoke?" The merchant squinted through the stinging air and said, "Yes, of course. My eyes are watering. The smoke is everywhere." The monk smiled and added more wood to the pile, causing the smoke to billow up even thicker. "Is it possible," the monk asked, "to have the fire without the smoke?" The merchant shook his head. "No. If you want the fire, you have to deal with the smoke. That is just how wood burns." "Exactly," the monk said. "Happiness is the fire, but the problems, the stress, the daily irritations, those are the smoke. You cannot have a life that burns bright without a little bit of smoke. You are suffering not because there is smoke, but because you are trying to wave it away with your bare hands. You are trying to solve the unsolvable. You want a life with zero problems, but that is not life. That is a fantasy. This hits home for so many of us. We live in a culture that sells us the idea of a frictionless existence. We think that if we just buy the right planner, get the right job, or find the perfect partner, the smoke will disappear. But the smoke never disappears. The car will break down. The internet will go out during a Zoom call. You will get a mean comment on social media. That is just the texture of reality. The merchant's mistake was thinking that the presence of problems meant he was failing. But the problems were just proof that he was playing the game. There is another layer to this. specifically regarding how we process that pain. Because even if we accept the smoke, sometimes the air just gets too thick to breathe. How do we handle that? There is a beautiful story about a young apprentice who was always complaining to his master about how hard his life was. He was bitter, angry, and constantly venting about his struggles. The master, tired of hearing the same complaints, told the young man to bring a handful of salt and a glass of water. "Put the salt in the glass," the master instructed. The apprentice did so. "Now, drink it." The apprentice took a sip and immediately spat it out. "It is awful," he shouted. "It is so salty it burns my throat." The master chuckled and told the young man to grab another handful of salt. He then led him to a large, freshwater lake nearby. "Now," the master said, "throw the salt into the lake." The young man tossed the salt into the water, watching it dissolve instantly into the vast blue expanse. "Now drink from the lake," the master said. The apprentice knelt down, cupped his hands, and drank the cool, fresh water. "How does it taste?" the master asked. "It tastes sweet," the apprentice replied. "It is refreshing. Do you taste the salt?" "No," the young man said. "Not at all." The master sat down beside him and said, "The pain of life is pure salt. No more, no less. The amount of pain remains the same, but the amount of bitterness we taste depends on the container we put it in. So when you are in pain, the only thing you can do is to stop being a glass and become a lake. This creates such a powerful shift in perspective. When we are hyper-focused on our own problems, when we obsess over what someone said to us or how many likes we did not get, we are shrinking our world down to the size of a shot glass. In that small space, every minor inconvenience feels like a tragedy. But when we expand our perspective, when we connect with nature, help others, or just realize how big the universe actually is, we become the lake. The salt is still there, but it no longer defines the flavor of our lives. There is a fascinating story about David Lloyd George, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He was known for a peculiar habit during his evening walks. One day, he was strolling through a garden with a friend, and as they passed through each gate, Lloyd George would stop, turn around, and firmly latch it shut. He did this for every single gate, no matter how small. His friend finally got impatient and asked, "Why do you bother doing that? We are just going to walk back this way eventually. Why not leave them open?" Lloyd George paused, his hand resting on the weathered wood of a gate, and said, "I have made it a habit of my life to close gates behind me. When I close a gate, I put the past behind me. Whether it was a victory or a clumsy mistake, I shut it out so I can focus entirely on what is in front of me." This is such a profound metaphor for how we navigate our modern lives. Think about your brain like a web browser. How many tabs do you have open right now? You are thinking about that email you forgot to send, the awkward thing you said at the party 3 years ago, the relationship that ended, but you are still stalking on social media and the 5-year plan you're falling behind on. You have 50 tabs open, and you wonder why your operating system is crashing. We are terrified of closing the gates. We think if we keep analyzing the past, we can somehow fix it. But the past is a closed room. You cannot rearrange the furniture in a house you no longer live in. The only thing keeping those doors open does is create a draft that chills your present moment. To truly move forward, to find that inner peace we are all desperate for, you have to be brave enough to hear the click of the latch. You have to say, "That chapter is done," and walk away without looking back over your shoulder. But closing the door is only half the battle. The other half is dealing with the pressure to be perfect once we step through that new door. We live in the era of the curated life. We scroll through feeds of pristine apartments, perfect morning routines, and flawless careers. We convince ourselves that if our lives are not optimized and aesthetically pleasing, we are failing. There is a beautiful antidote to this toxic perfectionism found in the Book of Tea by Okakura Kakuzo. It tells the story of the legendary tea master Sen no Rikyu. Rikyu had a son who was training to follow in his footsteps. One autumn afternoon, Rikyu asked his son to clean the garden path. The young man was eager to impress his father. He raked the gravel until it was perfectly smooth. He picked up every single twig. He wiped the stone lanterns until they shone. He spent hours making sure the garden was immaculate, absolute geometrical perfection. He called his father out and said proudly, "Father, I am finished. Look, there is not a single stray leaf on the ground." The master looked at the pristine, sterile garden. He did not smile. He shook his head and said, "This is not the way." Rikyu then walked over to a maple tree that was glowing with autumn colors. He reached up and shook a branch, just hard enough so that a handful of red and gold leaves drifted down and scattered across the perfectly raked gravel. He turned to his shocked son and said, "Now, the garden is truly clean." This is the essence of wabi-sabi, the Japanese aesthetic that finds beauty in imperfection, impermanence, and incompleteness. The master was teaching his son that life is not about sterilization. It is not about scrubbing away every flaw until you are left with something cold and artificial. Real beauty and real life requires a few fallen leaves. It requires texture. We spend so much energy trying to sweep the leaves out of our lives. We beat ourselves up because we are not waking up at 5 in the morning every day, or because our career path looks a bit messy compared to our friends. We think the goal is a blank slate, but a blank slate is boring. A blank slate has no story. So, as we stand here at the threshold of a new chapter, I want you to look at your own garden. Look at the mistakes you have made this year. Look at the plans that fell apart. Instead of trying to hide them or scrub them away, look at them like those fallen maple leaves. They add color to your story. They prove that you are alive, that you are trying, that you are part of the natural rhythm of the universe. We often talk about fresh starts as if we need to burn everything down and become a completely new person. But you do not need to become a new person. You just need to be a lighter version of yourself. You need to be the person who knows how to close the gate on the past, and the person who knows that a few leaves on the ground make the view more beautiful. The universe does not ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be present. It asks you to stop fighting the smoke and just enjoy the fire. It asks you to stop being the glass that holds the bitter salt and start being the lake that dissolves it. So, here is my question for you tonight, and I really want you to think about this before you scroll to the next video. What is one gate you have been leaving open that you finally need to close? What is the one thing from the past you need to forgive yourself for so you can actually enjoy right now? Let's stop carrying the heavy luggage. Let's shake the tree, let the leaves fall where they may, and walk into this next chapter with a little less weight and a lot more peace. I will see you in the next one.